In our last videos, we looked at creating a database, putting some sample data in it, and getting our NetBeans project, our Java web application project, to read that database. And so I had a database of my friends, and when I viewed all my friends, they were just simply returned in a list. So I would have their ID, which was the primary key, their name, email, age, and their favorite color. So that functionality was working well. Now I want to add the ability to add a new friend. And so if I look at the flow of this and how it will go, I'm still using my same database. I still have the driver, the friends model, and my file that holds the database connection properties. What I need to do now is when this table is returned, down below the table, I need a new hyperlink to add a new friend. And that's going to call the add form servlet. The add form servlet will then call add.jsp, which will present me with a form that I can enter the pertinent details in. After I click submit, these details will be passed to the add servlet. They'll be passed on through to the add query, where I actually do the SQL to insert the new record in the database. After that record is inserted, it'll come back to add servlet. And after that, add servlet will call the read servlet that we have already created that's just reading the database. And it will take us back to that table and show us the new row that's been included. So let's get started working on this functionality. So the first thing I want to do is get into read.jsp. And here under my table that lists all of my friends, I'm going to just put in a hyperlink. So notice this is not a hyperlink to a page, but a hyperlink to a servlet. And it will be a hyperlink to the add form servlet. So when the user clicks on this, it will invoke the add form servlet. So I need to make sure when I create that add form servlet that I do the URL mapping for add. So the next thing I want to do now is create that add form servlet. So a new servlet. Here's the URL mapping. And when I get in here, remember I've got the do get and the do post. The do get method, I'm going to not do what NetBeans is suggesting, but instead I'm going to just pass the execution down to the do post. So this way I only have to write my code in one place, but I can handle both a get or a post request. When I come down under the do post, I'm not going to do what NetBeans suggests. I am going to open add.jsp. So essentially I need to create a variable, string variable called URL with add.jsp in it. So it's just telling it what form do you want to open. And then I'm going to create a request dispatcher, and I'll have to import that request dispatcher. And the request dispatcher is just a way that I can move between pages. So it's going to just send me to add.jsp because that's URL, and it's going to send any request or any response details. So right now I'm here. I've created this hyperlink, and the hyperlink was mapped to just add, not a page, but a servlet. I created the add form servlet, and I did the URL mapping for add. So when this is clicked, this is invoked. And when this is invoked, it is just simply calling add.jsp. So now I need to create add.jsp. And here I've just added a new JSP file and called it add. There's nothing unusual at the top. I've set the title and I've set an H1. And then I've created a form. And inside of the form, I gave it a name so it can uniquely identify this form. I gave it an action called add friend, and it's a get method. So when this form is submitted, it's going to want to do this add friend. So I need to make sure this servlet, this add servlet, has a URL mapping of add friend. After that, I just label my fields. So I want my friend name, email address, age, and favorite color is what I'm expecting to collect. They're going to be input boxes, text boxes. I give them unique names so that I can identify them as they're coming across in the request. So name, email, age, and color. And all their values are set null right now. And finally, I have a submit button. And when this is clicked, it will invoke this add friend action. So I believe I have this functionality working so far. I'll go ahead and test that. So here I am in my index.jsp. When I click this, it opens the read servlet. The read servlet creates this table. And at the bottom, I have my add a new friend link. When I click this, it will invoke the add form servlet, which will open add.jsp, which it's doing. Now this is pretty messy. I'll need to go back and clean it up. And right now the submit button doesn't do anything, but I have this functionality loop right here working. So the next thing I'm going to work on is this add query class. And then after I have the SQL working and everything going in there like I would like, I will call it using the add servlet. To create the add query, I'll come into DB helpers, a new Java class, and it's called add query. And inside of the add query class, I'll need a connection. And I'll need to import connection from Java SQL. The next thing I need to do is set up an add query method that will actually make the connection. And this is going to just be simply making a connection. And I've already done this, so I can copy and paste. So let me get into read query. And right here, I can just grab all of this. Because this is just simply setting up properties, reading in the dbcon file, closing it up after I've read it in, setting the driver URL, username, and password properties, setting all those, and making that connection. So it's doing exactly the same thing that we were doing in read. When I paste it in, notice it needs several things, input stream, driver manager, properties, all of those. I can just OK to import. And then I do need to go down and look to see if anything needs cleaned up, and I can see some of the read queries have come over. Some of the language read queries have come over, so I changed those to add queries. And that's mostly in the debugging and the exception catching. I can Control F and look for read query. And it's not finding any, so I replaced them all. So now it's loading the things that it needs, and I'm basically building my connection here. So after that's set and there's no errors, I can shrink it up and come down under it. After my connection's made, I need a way to add the object. I'll create a doAdd method. It's the friends class, the friend object. I will need to import my model. This is where the actual SQL statement goes. So I'm going to set up a string variable called query. And this is the SQL to actually do the inserting. So insert into my friends database, my friends table, sorry. So insert into the friends table, friend name, email address, age, and favorite color, the values. And these are tokens. And they're just placeholders that will populate in the prepare statement. So I'm creating a prepared statement named PS. I'm using that connection that I'm created up here in the add query. And I'm going to pass it the query. Now here I'm telling the prepared statement what to use for those different tokens. So for the first token, or for the first question mark here, I want to use the friend name. So from the friend object, get the friend name, put it in the first token position. From the friend object that's coming in here, get the email address, put it in the second token position. And these token positions line up with how we expect them to appear in our database. And then finally, I want to execute update. Now notice this is different from read. Read executes query, but if we're going to add, update, or delete, we need to execute update. I'll need to import the prepared statement. And these can throw exceptions. So I've just surrounded the block with the try catch. And so this is doing the heavy lifting of grabbing my object from my model and sticking it into the database. And those are the two that I'll need. I need to create the connection and then I need to add. So I'm finished with add query. And now it's time to actually create the add servlet. So under controllers, I'll create a new servlet. I'll call it add servlet. And here that URL mapping needs to match what's on my form, which I believe was add friend. The action of this form needs to be the URL mapping for this add servlet. Okay, so now I'm in the add servlet, and again, I've got the do get and the do post. I don't want to do anything in the get. So under do get, I want to get rid of what NetBeans suggests I do there. And I want to just simply pass execution down to do post. And when I come down to do post, I'm going to get rid of NetBeans suggestion and do my own thing. So this is the pseudocode or the logic inside of my post that will make the add work. The first thing I need to do is get the data from the form from add.jsp. After I have the data from the form, I need to build a new friend object and populate it with that data. Then I need to create an add query object that I can pass. And then I'll need to pass this friend object into that add query object. And after add query is done and it comes back, I need to pass execution back to the read servlet. So let's take a look at those individual steps. So parameters will come from the add.jsp into the servlet. So I need to set up variables to capture those parameters. So string variable of the type name, I would expect name to be coming across as a parameter. In add.jsp, the friend's name is in the input named name. Their email address is in the input box named email, and age and color. So these are the input parameters that are coming in. These are the variables that I'm storing out locally, and I have to make sure that my variable data types match what I expect to be coming across. So in this case, age is an integer. I would need to set it as an integer type. The next thing I need to do is set up my friend object. So my class or my model friends is the type. Friend is my object, and it's going to be of the new friends class. And I need to import my friend model. So I have a new object named friend of the data type friends, and it's a new instance of that class friends. Finally, this object needs to get populated. I'm going to use my setters to set the file name in the model equal to the name variable. This variable and this mean the same thing. When I populated email from the parameter here, I'm going to take that email variable and use it to set the email address in friend. When I captured the age from the parameter, I'm going to use that age variable and set age in my model. So now all the fields of my model are set. Next thing I need to do is create an add query object. The type is add query. The object or the single instance of it is AQ equals new add query class. And I'll need to import that. This new add query that I just created here, the doAdd method, I'm going to pass the friend object. So now add query will instantiate here. It will create the connection. We're doing the doAdd method and we told it to expect friend, so we're passing that. And then it will be able to find all of these properties. We set the properties in the add servlet based off of what was coming from the parameters. And here we're going to get those properties and put them in the tokens so they can be inserted into the database. Finally, when this is done, we're going to pass execution to the read servlet. So here I'm going to not a page, but a name, a URL mapping read, which will invoke the read servlet, and read servlet will return the table and show me the new friend in the table. And here I'll need to import request dispatcher. Okay, so now it's time to test. So let's save this all up. From index.jsp, I'm going to click this, and you'll notice down here, it's going to invoke the read servlet. The read servlet runs. It creates this table. Below this table, I have the ability to add a new friend. Notice this hyperlink is going to invoke the add servlet. which is the add form servlet. When I click that, I get this new add form, add.jsp here. When I click submit, this form, the action type is add friend. Add friend is a URL mapping for the add servlet. The add servlet takes the information coming out of that form, turns it into a friend object. It sets up an add query object and passes the friend object into that add query object. The add query creates a connection. It passes the SQL, and it has those 4 tokens. To fill in the information from them tokens, it uses the getters in the friend model and gets the information out, puts it in the correct place in the token, and finally updates the database. When the database has been updated, it comes back to add servlet, and add servlet then invokes the read servlet using the request dispatcher for read. The read servlet comes back here and updates the table, and I can see I have my new entry in the table. And so everything is working like we expect with adding new records to our database.